Hey, everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I have another special and different episode for you about my book, Ownershift. And joining me again are Richie Burke and Dave Will. Dave, Richie, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, man. Great to be here.
So today we're going to talk about a chapter out of the second part of the book. Second part is called Grind, and this chapter is called Lost in the Valley. And Lost in the Valley is this thing I came up with where I call this gap that I fell into, the uncertainty valley or the valley of uncertainty. I use both of those. And that's a place I fell into after my partner, Butch, passed away after being severely burned in a fire at one of our plants. It actually happened on October the 5th. 2003, and today happens to be October the 6th or the 7th when we're recording this. So it happened, right around this time, a number of years ago, but still on my brain like it happened the other day. But anyway, Butch was I started the business with him. He was the person who actually came to me and said, if you want to start a business, I want to be a partner with you. And he was just a rock. He was the yin to my yang, complementary skill sets, great personality. We could count on each other. We never had to worry whether one of us was holding up our end of the bargain. And when Butch died, it was kind of what I thought was maybe the last sort of stake in my heart, because it was devastating. And it also came on the heels of other things that happened that I thought were devastating along the way that I talk about in earlier chapters. So I basically retreated to this place where I had no idea what I wanted to. I had no idea what to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. What I was thinking was that this is just over. I mean, yeah, we have a company with maybe we had 50 people at the time, and I was really wanting to walk away from the whole thing. I couldn't do that because of those people, but I had no idea how I was going to lead people any further. So I dumped myself into this valley, and I wandered around in there for a couple of years, waiting. Like I had this stupid idea, guys, that I would wait there and someone would come along with their hand out, and they would grab my arm and pull me out of there and then tell me everything was going to be okay and then show me how to do everything that I didn't know how to do and make my world perfect. So it was a miserable place to be, but as I mentioned in the first episode, when I answered one of Dave's questions, the first special and different episode, I thought I was entitled to something that I hadn't earned. And in fact, what I had gotten, I mean, it's not like I earned Butch dying in the fire, but what had led me, what had put me in the valley was basically the system that I designed in my business and around myself, that I thought would turn out differently, but it turned out exactly how I caused it to be. And so the purpose in writing it is to let I want to share the story, but I also want people to know that it's okay if you end up in a valley or you end up in a gap or you end up in a place. It's inevitable, pretty much, I think, for most people, and it can feel horrible, and it's a real turning point for you as an entrepreneur. Like, what are you going to do when you start feeling like that? Because the world, some people will tell you the world will solve your problems for you, but the world doesn't care about your problems. They'll help you, but they don't care about your problems. Nobody's out to say, oh, let me give you that hand and pull you up out of there. So it was a very difficult chapter for me to write, but it was a very real chapter because it was a point in my life where on the outside, and we talked about this in the first special and different, I was holding up, I was trying to be the person I was, but on the inside I was not, and there was no way I could be the person I wanted to be on the outside if I couldn't be the person I needed to be on the inside. So let me start with Dave. Dave, what do you want to add to that, having read the chapter?
Well, first I want to say that I'm sorry that you had to go through that experience. It's a very vulnerable chapter, I'm sure, to write, and and you could feel it, which also makes part of what makes the book so good, I think, is really opening yourself up to your audience. And I do not think you need to go through that level of loss to succeed. It's unfortunate you had to.
Right.
Not to say there's a correlation. The second thing I want to say is so Lost in the Valley. The valley you're referring to from the introduction is the Uncertainty Valley. And
Yes.
what's really, really interesting to me is this is like, you ever hear the Dr. Seuss's book, Oh, the Places You'll Go?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course. Everybody's heard of Oh, the Places You'll Go. So basically, if Quentin Tarantino were to write Oh, the Places You'll Go, you've got this chapter. Like that, to me, that's what it is.
Sure.
You got Quentin Tarantino's version of Dr. Seuss's "Oh, the Places We Go." It's dark and awesome and heartfelt and emotional, and it's a very, very good story with a great takeaway. So one of the takeaways, I had a couple takeaways in this chapter.
Yeah.
One is the crisis mode. When you said there was insurance, I mean, so this huge event happens in the company, and then there was insurance, OSHA, workman's comp. What would happen to our record and our rates, and what would this all cost, and do we have enough money to handle it? So instant crisis mode, right? Which is it's not a normal part of operations. But it's something that you better be prepared for in your back pocket, even though you don't know what that crisis is going to be. For me, my company was hacked long before we really even knew what hacking was back in 2009 in terms of a small business. Like we all heard of TJ Maxx getting hacked, but like, why would a small business get hacked?
Yeah.
So we were hacked, and it was a massive crisis for us that distracted me for 6 months. And so I think the whole concept of going into crisis mode is really, really interesting. My other takeaway from this chapter was later in the chapter, you talk about the business. I'm quoting something you wrote here. The business wasn't a startup anymore. It had changed, and I had not. It was growing up, and I wasn't. I still treated it like it was a baby, and it still needed me, blah, blah. So you go on here. What this opened up to me, the interesting thing here. Oh, and then later you're like, I was unwilling to do the work that needed to be done. So what's interesting to me here is our businesses evolve and go through these stages. And as the entrepreneur, you gotta figure out or be guided down what your role is in the organization. So you talk about wearing your pager on your underwear to bed. And I think that wasn't your role anymore in the company to do that. And that's that was a massive conflict that you were dealing with. But what's interesting is I don't think you even really knew what needed to be done or how to change. So you were lost in the valley, right? Like you didn't have your Sherpa to get up Everest. And so that was interesting. So to me, the big takeaway there is what you needed more than anything else was a guide. You needed Dr. Seuss to hold your hand a little bit.
Right.
So hopefully not Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, that could have turned out even worse. I'm really glad you brought that up, Dave, because as I was writing that and thinking, I need a guide or I need a handout is what I really was thinking. I really wasn't smart enough to think about guide at the time. But when I was thinking about the title for the book, and it was a really great collaborative process with this great lady at Scribe to sort of go through this. But that's how we came up with the shift. And like, if you look at the book cover, which I don't have a book handy.
It's right over your shoulder. Yeah.
The shift part is like it's moving to one side, almost as if it's being dragged, and that's where kind of this whole idea solidified into the name Ownership, because I was at a spot where I needed to shift. I didn't need to pivot. I didn't need to get into a new business. The business was doing okay, but me as a leader and as an entrepreneur, I needed to shift because I didn't know how to handle this growing.
And you needed to shift, and you didn't know how to. You knew you needed to change something, but you didn't know what to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
We all get into those situations in life, whether it's personal in our relationships with our spouse or with our kids or with our business or with our garden outside. It's like, there's something I got to do. I just don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Richie.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what Dave said and what you guys are talking about, it's like the company starts at one point and then the company evolves, and you really need to evolve with it, and the people do too. And yeah, it's your job to do that. And sometimes the people who got you to one point definitely aren't going to get you to the next level, and just evolving the organization as a whole. And you guys know that better than I do. One of the main notes I took down, and Dave, you brought this up as well, but just the 10 years of having a pager attached to you. I've never had a pager, but I've, had my iPhone right here, and I know what that's like, just having that attached to me 24/7, and that takes a toll. And I think when you start a company and it's your baby, you get so used to that. And there's definitely times in startup mode where, you need to pull a late night, or you need to answer that 10:30 phone call from a customer, whatever that might be. But in 95% of cases, that's just very unnecessary in most ways. And I think letting go of some of that stuff is obviously important and necessary, because we talked about mental health a little bit in that first in that intro chapter, but that's a tough way to go through life, and usually isn't very necessary as well.
Yeah, I wish I were a lot smarter about that. I think I may not have kept myself out of there, but out of the valley, but it brings to me a lesson that I learned from a guy after I was in the valley, where, he told me that, and I mentioned this earlier about, designing a system. You get what you ask for in life. So for me, I was asking customers and employees and team members, like, call me anytime you want, page me anytime, 24/7, I'll be available for you. And all they were doing was exactly what I asked them to do. And for a while, I got energy out of it, because I'm like, they need me, right? And then after a while, I think I write it in the book, I wanted to take that pager and run it over with my truck, because I hated that thing after a while. But instead of doing something differently, they just continued to do exactly what I asked for, what they thought I wanted. And I think that's a good lesson for all of us. You do get what you ask for as an entrepreneur most of the time, or a lot of the time. And if you want it changed, just ask for something different. And people will normally do things differently the way you want them. People want to please, right? Most people want to please. They want to do what's right for you and for the business.
And then I think the one other main takeaway that I know you both have gone through, and hopefully it doesn't take someone passing away. And it's terrible that you had to go through that and what happened to Butch, but just crisis mode, usually a lot of times when you hit a bottom, it just causes you to take a lot of action and make a change for the better. A lot of people sometimes have to hit crisis mode or a rock bottom to actually make a change, and it seems like you hit that point and turned it, I wouldn't say into a full positive. Obviously you wish Butch was still there, but making the most out of that situation that you were in.
Yeah, definitely. And by sharing my experience, I want to help more people reading the book and entrepreneurs that coming behind me to don't get into that valley. Do not get into that valley. There's ways to avoid getting into the valley, and later in the book I talk about how to do that, or how, for me at least, how to do that, how I was able to do that. And you want to stay out of there. But and I want people to understand that you often get exactly what you ask for. Maybe not in the exact way you asked for it, but it figures out a way to manifest itself the way you asked for it. And so just ask for something different. So guys, thank you so much for joining me to talk about chapter 18, Lost in the Valley, from part 2 of the ownership book. Grind is part 2. You can find the book on Amazon or anywhere you get books, or you can also get it on my website at mikemalatesta.com. Richie Burke, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, sir.
Dave Will, thank you for joining me as well. Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.